This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
It's very poignant to be here right before the Yom Tov of Purim at the Kever of Rabbi Michoel Doiv ben Rav Yosef Weismandel, Rabbi Michoel ber Weismandel, the great tzaddik. He was born in 1903 on the 4th day of Cheshvan. He was Nifter Vav Kislev, Tavshin Yudches, 1957. His father was a shoichet, and Rav Weismandel was born in Slovakia. And 1931, he comes to Nitra to learn under the Nitra Rav Shmuel David Unger, who ultimately, Rav Weismandel marries his daughter, Bracha Rachel. And so he was an Oberlander Yid, was not a Hasidic Yid, and he's one of the great minds of the Jewish people in our history. Really, it's so interesting that he was an expert in many manuscripts. In fact, he traveled to Oxford to go to the Bodleian Library. And interesting legend has it that he's so impressed, the librarian in the Bodleian Library, that he was given special access to various manuscripts. Now, Rav Weismandel really dedicated his life to his younger years to be able to save as many Yidden as possible. And Nebuch, broken-hearted, he felt there was so much that could have been done, but unfortunately it fell on deaf ears. Rav Weismandel collected money to bribe various officials, Roosevelt, Churchill, the Pope, but ultimately the world did not want to hear what they knew was true. He was able to successfully halt to a great deal the extermination of Slovakian Jewry for about 2 years. However, after that amount of time, 1944, they were rounded up, including Rav Weismandel and his family. They were put on the cattle car and they were headed to Auschwitz. Rav Weismandel was a brilliant mind. He had hid a knife in a challah, and he took out the knife. He chiseled a hole in the cattle car and he jumped the train and he went back to Slovakia, and ultimately his life was saved. But he never forgot the fate of his wife, and he never forgot the fate of his family, and he was distraught, depressed over the fate of his people and his family. He comes to the United States and he remarries the daughter of the Atzei Chaim, Rav Chaim Elio Teitelbaum, and he had another 5 children. But as it says on the Kever, Masar nafshoy lahatzil amoy va'adasa, he gave up his life to save his people. Yoimam v'laylo lahishvus b'sheres koichai. Avla nehi ubechi loy paskam ita, he did not stop his mourning. Lekever hoyred Sarah, he brought his grieving down to the grave. Rav Weismandel comes to New York together with his brother-in-law, Rav Shalom Moshe Unger, the son of the Nitra Rav. They established the yeshiva in Nitra, in Somerville, New Jersey. And I want to thank my good friend, Rav Nassim Weldler, who he's a great-grandson of Rav Shraga Feivel Mendelovich, who Rav Shraga Feivel was successful in helping the Nitra helping Rav Michoel ber establish the yeshiva in Mount Kisco in Somersville. Okay, we have traffic here in the cemetery. We can push this to the side for a minute. Now, the Nitra Rav was not a healthy man. He suffered from a number of heart attacks, and finally in 1957 he was hospitalized for a few weeks, and ultimately he was nifter on the 6th day of Kislev in the year 5718, 1957. So we're here now at the Kever in Woodbridge Memorial Gardens in Woodbridge, New Jersey, and it's rather poignant that Rabbi Michoel ber is renowned. Many don't know that he was Baki Mamish B'Kol Mektzais HaTorah, especially in the words of the Rishonim. But he was an expert in counting the letters of the Torah. He had almost a mind that worked like a mechashev, like a computer. In fact, the story goes, it's brought in the Vaharavna of Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, that Rabbi Yaakov Mordechai Greenwald was once conversing with Rabbi Michoel ber Weismandel, and he says, Rabbi Michoel Ber says to him, do you know how many letters are in the Megillah? He said, no, I guess I must have just slipped my mind. Rabbi Michoel Ber says there are 12,196 letters in the Megillah. So Rabbi Greenwald said, no, what are you going to do with that? He says, let me show you. You go to the first Aleph in the Torah of Bereshis, and from there you count 12,196 letters, the number of letters in Megillah Esther, and you get to a Samach. And from there you count 12,196 letters, you get to a Taf. And likewise, you count 12,196 letters, you get to a Reish. That's the Remez to Esther. Starting from the first Aleph in the Torah, you count the number of letters in Megillah Esther, it spells out Esther. Now just between us, the statistic likelihood of spelling out a word in that kind of jump is impossible. So Rav Greenwald asked, so Nu, where's Mordechai? So Weismandel says, I don't know right now, but I'll tell you next year. Comes back next year, Rav Weismandel says, don't worry, I didn't forget about it. Where is Mordechai alluded to in the Torah? Mordechai min ha-Torah minayin, Mar Derar, the Targum says, Mare Dachia. If you count from the letter Mem of Mar Derar, 12,196 letters, you get a Reish. From there, 12,196 letters, you get a Daled. From there, the same jump, you get a Chaf, and then a Yud. Mordechai. Who could imagine being able to uncover such compelling secrets of the Torah? It's even brought that Rabbi Greenwald said there was a particular lady who was a tough cookie. She would not be mamin and tarmin hashamayim, but when she was presented with this Torah code, and she worked in statistics, she admitted that it's statistically impossible in any document to have cogent words spelled out in this kind of jump. I have my own experience because I once shared a remez of Michoel Ber Weismandel, and somebody came over to me. This was in a shul where I was a Rav in Queens, and said to him, this was the most compelling evidence to Torah min hashamayim that he ever came across. And this is well known, but to me it's particularly poignant. I heard this from my father so many times, but to be able to say it at the Kever of Michoel Ber, he was the one who discovered this. We know in Megillah Esther, there are large letters and there are small letters. The large letter are the letter Ches in Chor Karpas U'Secheles, the letter Taf of Vatichtaiv. And the Svarim teach us, this is brought in the Shi'er Ma'oin of the Irloi, is brought in the writings of Rav Shanshin Me'ashapoli, and elsewhere, that the big Taf and the big Ches is brought in the She'eres Yisrael, it's brought in the Yismach Moshe. This big Taf and Ches represents Tach v'Tat, that Mordechai and Esther encoded in the Megillah the future tsaros of Klal Yisrael, so to speak, and the future salvations. Well, says Rabbi Michoel Ber, we know if you look in the 10 sons of Haman, you have 3 small letters. You have a small Taf, a small Shin, and a small Zayin. But we know the year Taf Shin Zayin occurred 6 times in our history. There's also a big Vav in Vaizasa. Says Rabbi Michoel Ber, we know, 1946, 10 Nazis, actually 11 Nazis, were tried for their wartime atrocities that they committed to the Jewish people. And because the Vatican pleaded for amnesty, the court case was delayed until the following year, 1947, Tafshin Zayin, on Hoshana Rabbah. And by that time, one of the Nazis, Göring, had already committed suicide, so they're down to 10. And they were all hanged in the year Tafshin Zayin. Which Tafshin Zayin? The big Vav, 5707, the 6th time Tafshin Zayin happened in our history. This is alluded to in the Aseres B'nai Haman. Who discovered this? Who could have come up with this incredible remez? Somebody told me in his mind, this is the clearest evidence that Torah is min hashamayim. It seems like the codes of Rabbi Michoel Ber were so compelling to people. People just said, okay, they're mahida al ha'emes, that this is a divine document. And as we know, Julius Streicher, when he was taken to be executed, he cried out, Purim Fest, 1946, indicating that this is not the first time in our history that the Jewish people celebrated the hanging of 10 Amalekim. This was what he called Purim Hasheni, the second Sveitin Purim, he said. This was the second Purim for the Jewish people. This is one of the koichos of Rabbi Michoel ber Weismandel. And to say it at the Kever, right before the Yom Tov of Purim, is quite a poignant moment. Rabbi Michoel ber believed, Leka midi delay remiza ba'iraisa. There's nothing that's not alluded to in the Torah. He believed that all the technology that is coming out in our century is all alluded to in the Torah. So, one thing that he would say is that he tried to raise so much money to be able to bribe officials to buy the lives of Jewish people. And people didn't want to buy these Yidden. In fact, he would say in the Toichacha, when it says, V'hismakartem sham, you will be sold, V'ein koine, but nobody wants to buy you, that referred to his efforts to try to redeem Yidden for money, and people didn't take him up on it. Now, Rabbi Michoel ber said, there's a remez to America in the Torah. Where? It says about the Torah, the Torah is not overseas. So it says, if it's talking to the Jews in Asia and Europe, what does it mean the Torah is not overseas? Of course it's not overseas. What is the message of the Torah, that the Torah is not overseas? The answer is it's talking to the Jews in America. And it's saying to the Jews in America, don't think you need to go to Eretz Yisrael to learn Torah. The Torah is wherever you want to bring it. It's loy me'ever layam. Interestingly, in the 50s, when the Russians were sending Sputnik into outer space, and there was talk about landing on the moon, so some did not want to believe it is possible to land on the moon. After all, it says Hashamayim Shamayim LaHashem Ve'aretz Nasam Le'adam, and Rabbi Michoel ber says no. It's a beferish pasuk in Ovadia, Parak Aleph pasuk Aleph. In Bein Koichavim Tasim Kinech, you put your nest in the stars, I'll bring you down from there. All it means is that man can't live in a permanent manner in outer space, and even if they do, it's only because they bring the oxygen from Earth. And Rabbi Michoel ber had astounding remazim, and he said that when he would see a Sefer Torah, the letters of the Torah would rise up and dance before him. That's how he appreciated the words of the Torah. Here we have, he says, Dava kaya kol yemei chayav v'Hashem u'v'Toirasai v'Rabin heishav me'avim b'ma'amorai b'chachmasai b'demais u'v'hisoiros hoisat tfilasai Yatsa mimenu k'mayin ha'meskabar Torah. His Torah emanated him like a powerful river. He was able to uncover the secrets of the Talmud, and Seder Limudei al Darkei Rishonim Hoysam Megamasei. His focus was to uncover the words of the Rishonim from the Gemara. Peh Mapik Margolius, a mouth that emanated pearls. Oisiois HaTorah B'Safrai, in his counting of the letters of the Torah. He is, so to speak, the father of the Torah codes, and this, of course, is a great chilek of Torah. As Reb Chaim Vital says, most of the secrets of the Torah lay in what is called diluge oisios. So here, we're in the aftermath of Parshas Zachar, the destruction of Amalek, heading into the Yom Tov of Purim. And even though Nebuch, as mentioned in the Megillah, many of the Gzeros are revealed in Megillas Esther, but now we hope we should be zoicha to the ultimate downfall of Amalek and the Yeshua of Klal Yisrael. And when that great day of Tchias HaMesim comes, certainly Rabbi Michoel ber, together with all the tzaddikim, will rejoice. Yismach tzaddik hi chaza nakam. The tzaddikim will rejoice when they see the revenge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They will be zoicha to see the nefila of all of our oivim and be Yeshuas Yisrael. B'mher v'yameinu amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.